Alright, this is the theory section of my application to B.I.M.M Manchester. We'll start off by doing the circle of fifths. Now, as I've already drawn out, the circle of fifths is obviously a circle whereby each stage going clockwise is comprised of the fifth note, in this case of the C major scale. And as it's deduced by going along the C major scale and then going to the fifth note, then putting that at the next step. And then this is repeated time and time again until the circle is eventually completed. The circle of fifths is used for deducing how many sharps or flats there are in a particular scale, major scale in this case. So if we notice, as I've already drawn on the inside, I hope I haven't drawn it too small, you'll notice that there is one sharp at the G major interval. So we know that there is one sharp already, as I've laid out. But for, let's say, A for instance, you notice that there's three sharps in the key of A major. So along this, to me, right-hand column here, you'll notice that there's a series of notes, and this is called the order of sharps, and it tells you which notes are going to be sharpened in the A major scale. So in this case, we go clockwise, and we notice that A is 3 steps away from C, 1, 2, 3. So we go down the order of sharps, 1, 2, 3, and we finally deduce that the notes F, C, and G are going to be sharpened in that scale, and only those notes. So in the A major scale, there'll be F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And the same is true for going anti-clockwise. However, to deduce the number of flats, that is. However, we use this column on what is my left to do that, and we repeat the exact same. This is known as the order of flats. So let's say E flat major, we notice that is 3 steps away from C. So we go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and we notice that the notes B, E, and A are going to be flattened. And as you can see, there are 3 flats. Alright, the next thing that we're going to cover is key signatures, and all that simply means is keys are essentially groups of notes that you're essentially permitted to play in that particular key. Now, on a musical stave, you'll have the treble clef, and then you'll have either a series of sharps or a series of flats. For the sake of demonstration purposes, I'm keeping it to just a simple sharp. Now that sharp indicates that it is in the key of G major. Why? Because it is on the part of the stave that denotes F, the note F. So that note there is going to be an F sharp. It denotes that all F notes will be F sharp, unless it has that little symbol right next to it indicating that it is going to be an F natural. And just that note and that note only. The next note will be F sharp, and from there on. Alright, the next thing that we're going to cover is scales. Scales are a predetermined set of intervals that will ultimately make up the scale. In this case, C major scale, which we've already gone from C to its octave. There are the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now, out of a possible 12 notes, we've selected 8 of these at specific intervals that form a major scale. These intervals are whole, whole, half, whole, 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 and half. indicating that there is a whole note between C and D, and only a half note between D and D. Sorry, a half note between E and F. Sorry, indicating that we've bypassed C sharp and D sharp and jumped straight to D, and similarly from D to E. Now it's this predetermined order of intervals, let's say, that determine any major scale, and of course you can mess around per se with the order of these intervals, you will get a completely different scale. Notable examples of these scales could be, let's take the modes, which C major, otherwise known as Ionian, has this formula. You could also have Dorian, which is has a whole, half, whole, half, whole formula, and Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. They all have their own unique intervallic formulae, let's say, for the want of a lesser pretentious term. Alright, the next bit that we're going to be covering is time signatures. Now, I have 5 examples here of my personal favourite time signatures that I like playing in. Most common of which is 4/4, which comprises about 90% of all the music that you'll hear. However, evidently, there are others, such as 7/8, which means that there are 7/8 notes to every bar. That's all time signatures are. They are how long a particular bar is and what it is measured by. For example, quarter notes or eighth notes or 16th notes, very rarely. And that's what the bottom number denominates, how many there are in every bar. Sorry, what it's going to be measured by. That top number denominates how many there are in every bar. So, for example, 4/4 indicates that there are 4 quarter notes to every bar. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 7/8, for example, indicates that there are 7/8 notes to every bar. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. 5/4 indicates that there are 5 quarter notes to every bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the same is true for every other time signature out there. It is simply how long a bar is and what you're counting it in. Alright, the next thing that we're going to be covering, and probably the briefest topic, is rhythm. Now, rhythm is how a bar could be played out, and how, as we know, there are the equivalent of 4 quarter notes into every bar of 4/4, and you can mess around not just with quarter notes, but also with 8th and 16th notes. So, for example, we could be as we are here, instead of just going, you could also go, which is just one rhythmic variation of 4/4. Alright, the next subject that we're covering is note values. Now, on a stave, you'll have these common notes, which are a whole note, a half note, quarter, eighth, and 16. And each note is subdivided into 2. So, let's say 2 of these 16th notes will fit into an 8th note, which in turn 2 will fit into a quarter, 2 will fit into a half, and 2 of these will fit into a whole. They're all subdivided, and it's a matter of equivalence. So 4 quarter notes will be the equivalent of a whole note, hence the name. And all these notes can be equivalent. So 16 quarter, 16 16th notes are the equivalent of one whole note, and it's a simple matter of that, or subdividing it by 2. However, it can also mean that, you know, 4 8 notes are also the equivalent of one half note, and it's all a matter of equivalence. Alright, chords, there's a whole plethora of chords that you can use, but this is just a few of them. Triads, which are the most common type of chords, as the name implies that there are 3 different components to them, that being a root, a third, and a fifth. Now, a major triad will be comprised of a root, in this case C, a major third, E, and a fifth, which is G. Now, a variation on that could be the minor triad, whereby the third is flattened by a half note, making it into E flat. Seventh chords are an addition onto that, and there are many possible combinations that are, I'm not going to mention for the sake of time. Seventh chords indicate that there is just simply another third added onto the fifth. So, a dominant seventh chord will mean that there is a major seventh in that chord. In this case, it will be B. So, and a diminished seventh will mean, a minor seventh chord will mean that it will have B flat instead of B. Now, diminished chords mean that the flat is fifth. The fifth is flattened. So instead of it being G, it will now be G flat. And another variation, you could also have it the minor seventh as well, meaning that instead of B, you can also have G flat and B flat in there as well. You could also completely flatten the third, making it very dark sounding. So it would be C, E flat, G flat, and B flat. And there are an entire myriad of combinations that you could put into chords. Chords are more than one note played simultaneously, which is where they differ from scales, for instance. Alright, intervals next. Now, intervals are the distance between 2 notes relative to each note. Now, I have them all laid out here, that being a root, a minor second, a major second, a minor third, a major third, or a diminished fourth, a perfect fourth, an augmented fourth, or a diminished fifth, a perfect fifth, an augmented fifth, or as known as a minor sixth, a major sixth, a minor seventh, a major seventh, and lastly the octave. Now, there are 12 possible intervals that one can get, and that relates to all 12 notes in the musical alphabet. So, if I write out C to C, so C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, you'll notice how all the notes correlate to a different interval, which is how far they are away from this root note, which is C.